Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamunatiravanachari Yamunatiravanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya Ashtottara Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada Ki Jai. Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Could I have the book? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We are reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 2, text number 46. 46. Nata param karma nibandha grantanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat na yat puna karmasu sajjate mano rajas tamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha nataf param karma nibandha krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat punah karma susajjate mano rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha nataf param karma nibandha krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat punah karma susajjate mano rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha nataf param karma nibandha krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat punah karma susajjate mano rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha natak param bandha krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat punah karma susajjate mano rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha natak param karma nibandhana krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat punah karma susajjate mano rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha nataf param karma nibandha krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat punah karma susajjate mano rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha nataf param karma nibandha krintanam mumukshatam tirtha padanukirtanat nayat punah karma sajjate mano Rajastamobhyam kalilam tatonyatha. Anybody on Zoom? Or, yeah, sorry. Param karma. Tapas Prabhu? No, Tapas Prabhu.
My net connection is not good, Prabhu.
Okay, then we'll move on. Na, not. Ataha, therefore. Param, better means. Karma nibandha, the obligation to suffer or undergo tribulations as a result of fruitive activities. Krantanam, that which can completely cut off. Mumukratam, of persons desiring to get out of the clutches of material bondage. Tirthapada, about the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at whose feet all the holy places stand. Anukirtanat, then constantly chanting under the direction of the bona fide spiritual master. Na, not. Yat, because. Punaha, again. Karmasu, in fruitive activities. Sajjate, becomes attached. Manaha, the mind. Rajahattamobhyam, by the modes of passion and ignorance. Kalilam, contaminated. Tataha, thereafter. Anyatha, by any other means. Translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Therefore, one who desires freedom from material bondage should adopt the process of chanting and glorifying the name, fame, form, and pastimes of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, at whose feet all the holy places stand. One cannot derive the proper benefit from other methods, such as pious atonement, speculative knowledge, and meditation in mystic yoga, because even after following such methods, one takes to fruitive activities again, unable to control his mind, which is contaminated by the base qualities of nature, namely passion and ignorance. Purport. It has actually been seen that even after achieving so-called perfection, many karmis, jnanis, and yogis become attached to material activities again. Many so-called swamis and yogis give up material activities as false, jagan mithya. But after some time, they nevertheless resume material activities by opening hospitals and schools or performing other activities for the benefit of the public. Sometimes they participate in politics, although still falsely declaring themselves sannyasis, members of the renounced order. The perfect conclusion, however, is that if one actually desires to get out of the material world, he must take to devotional service, which begins with Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnuhu, chanting and hearing the glories of the Lord. The Krishna consciousness movement has actually proved this. In the Western countries, many young boys who were addicted to drugs and who had many other bad habits which they could not give up, abandoned all those propensities and very seriously engaged in chanting the glories of the Lord as soon as they joined the Krishna consciousness movement. In other words, this process is the perfect method of atonement for actions performed in raja and tama, passion and ignorance. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.19, Tada rajastamo bhava kamalo bhādayaschaye cheta etair anabidham sthitam sattve prasidati. As a result of raja and tama, one becomes increasingly lusty and greedy. But when one takes to the process of chanting and hearing, one comes to the platform of goodness and becomes happy. As he advances in devotional service, all his doubts are completely eradicated. Bhidyate hṛdaya-granthiś, chidyante sarva-saṁśayāḥ. Thus the knot of his desire for fruitive activities is cut to pieces. Om ajnanatimidandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha nama shreshtam manamapi shachiputram atra swarupam rupam tasyagrajam urupurim mathurim goshtavatim radha kundam girivaramaho radhika madhavasham prapto yasya pratita kripaya shri gurum tam natosmi Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutapadakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagrana Raghunathan Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagrana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. I'm just going to pull something up really quick for future reference. Okay, good. Okay, so we are continuing our narration of Ajamil's situation. He's just been, well, of course, we read that the Vishnu Dutas came. Well, first the Yamadutas came, then the Vishnu Dutas came to save him. A great debate took place between them as to who had jurisdiction over his soul. And Ajamil has now woken up and is feeling very, you could say, remorseful for his activities, and he's went to Hardwar to engage in austerities, and then he went back to Godhead. So the happy ending, and now we're just hearing some, you could say, afterwards, kind of an epilogue, so to speak, on some of the principles one can derive from this pastime. So this verse is specifically talking about the glories of the process of Krishna consciousness. As Srila Prabhupada says, beginning with Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu. So there are many processes of spiritual realization, or so-called spiritual realization, that people engage in, and other processes for some kind of perfection, material perfection or otherwise. So many. And people are very, very serious about them. They're extremely serious about them. Even the most, at least in our eyes, in the eyes of somebody who's following the process of Krishna consciousness, even very absurd and very clearly flawed philosophies and very clearly just absurdly austere and just incorrect practices in general, people are very serious about them. Like, for example, Buddhism. Buddhism is really a very austere practice. Even just the basic, I mean, what to speak of, the very austere Buddhists, the really, Pukka Buddhists. But even just the practice of Buddhism in general, the philosophy of Buddhism is kind of a drag. Just sit and meditate and try to quiet your mind or focus your mind on one thing. Basically just by the power of will alone. There's nothing else really aiding you. Just by the power of will. So, yeah, but some people, they're very, very serious about Buddhism. So many Buddhist monks, Buddhists, you could say, masters who are meditating for so long, they're just completely like in samadhi. They're very serious about it. And same with Mayavadis. Mayavadis, they very, very scrutinizingly study Shastra, which is a good thing. But they're always speculating, always debating. This is right, this is the correct logical conclusion, this is the incorrect logical conclusion, just to kind of get in the game, so to speak, of being a Mayavadi. You have to learn all kinds of things. You have to learn so many, like for example, in the Smarta community, you have the Chaturvedis, you have the Trivvedis, who've memorized all 4 Vedas, means Rig, Yajur, Sama, and Atharva. Or 3 is common. I mean, not nowadays, but was common, very common. Trivvedis and Chaturvedis, and yogis as well. People are very, very serious. They're very serious, extremely austere yogis. Even in the Bhagavatam, it's seen, for example, Hiranyakashipu, very serious yogi, standing like this with his head up and his arms up, standing on his toes.
Listening.
Interesting. Okay. Glad someone's listening. Yeah, standing on his toes with his head up like this and his arms up for thousands of years. It's described that he stood there for so long that ants started to eat his body. Imagine standing in such an uncomfortable position, and then all of a sudden all these bugs come and they start eating you. And they built a whole hill around him, and basically they devoured his body, and just his subtle body remained. So extremely austere. And even your just baseline yogis, living in the Himalayas, wearing only a kopin in the snow. Very, very austere, barefoot, no shoes. Yeah, Smarta Brahmanas too. I know I'm kind of going on, but Smarta Brahmanas too. Just to chant their Gayatri is like a 20-minute ordeal every single morning, noon, and evening. You have to do Sandhya Vandanam, prayers to all the different directions. You do this. You view the sun like this. You interlock your fingers and you view the sun. You offer prayers to the sun. You can see in all kinds of mudras like this, and it's like a 20-minute ordeal, and then you chant your Gayatri. So, and they're very serious about it. Every day, morning, noon, and evening, they're doing this. So, people are very serious about these different spiritual processes. And some of them even achieve, you could say, a basically spiritual end, in the sense that, for example, merging into the Brahman effulgence is, it's spiritual to in the sense that it's above the modes of material nature, but not much else. So Srila Prabhupada, in a purport in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, I didn't bring it with me, but in the pastime, in the Adi Lila 7th chapter, where it's describing Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's talks with the Mayavadis at Kashi, the Mayavadi sannyasis, Prabhupada mentions in a purport that the verse is speaking about how Chaitanya Mahaprabhu flooded the entire world with Krishna consciousness, with Krishna prema, and nobody could avoid it. But the only people who evaded this flood of love of Godhead were the Shankara sannyasis at Kashi, because of their envious understanding. And so Srila Prabhupada, in the purport to this verse, he describes that the Buddhists of Sarnath, which is a major center of Buddhism in India, and the Mayavadis at Varanasi, they are advocates of utter materialism, which is an interesting statement, because you could say, okay, advocates of utter materialism, but they're giving up, they're much more renounced in one sense than we are. The Buddhists, living in a very solitary place, eating only what you're given. So many things, no driving in cars, no nothing. Same with the Mayavadis. Very austere, they're following austerities according to the regulative principles, very strictly. So it might seem contradictory. Okay, why? How can you say that they're advocates of utter materialism? There's an example that was given by my spiritual master, His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj, when he was preaching in Thailand. He was preaching in that area of the world: Burma, Thailand, Cambodia, etc. He was the temple president in Bangkok, Thailand. There's 6 devotees there. He was the temple president. And so there's a word in the Thai language, and the word is sanuk. And my Guru Maharaj says that this is the most important word in the Thai language, this sanuk. So sanuk basically means, it's translated roughly to fun. But sanuk it's not necessarily just fun. It's more of an ethos, you could say. That if it's not sanuk, it's not worth doing, basically. So sanuk. So Thailand, for some background, Thailand is a very staunch Theravada Buddhist country. Theravada is like the very strict, the Pukka traditional Buddhists, without any of the kind of fluff. And then Mahayana is the other school of Buddhism, which is prominent. They're worshiping Buddha kind of like we worship deities and like that. Not as strict. And I think they eat meat too and things like that. But the Theravada Buddhists, they're very staunch. They're very staunch, they're very strict. And so in this very staunch, strict Buddhist country, one lady came to the Bangkok temple. Oh, another thing about Thailand is they love eating pork. And so this woman comes to the Bangkok temple, and my spiritual master, who is the temple president, he asks her, he said, so you're eating pork, isn't it? And she said, yeah, I eat pork. And he said, but don't you know, because they believe in reincarnation, don't you know that if you eat pork in your next life, or well first he asked, he said, well, why do you do that? Don't you know that, that's bad? And she said, sanuk. Just sanuk. And he said, well, what about, in your next life, you're going to take birth as a pig? It'll be sanuk.
What is that?
Sanuk means, it means like fun, or it'll be nice. Like it's kind of like yeah. So.
How about the slogan part?
Yeah, yeah. So, sanuk. So one might question, okay, well, if it's such a staunch practice, why is it that so many? And you see among Buddhists, it's so many Buddhists. Practically to be a Buddhist, you have to be a monk. Just like to be a real Mayavadi, they say you have to take sannyas. So in the same way, Theravada Buddhists, the understanding is that you have to be a monk. Basically, you're not really doing anything until you become a monk. So, if you think about it, what is their prayojana? What is their goal? The end goal is to become nothing. Not even just to become nothing. It's more nothing than nothing, because there's no. Nothing means no thing. But in the perfection of Buddhism, there's not even a concept that there even is a thing. There's just nothing. It's an annihilation. Yeah. Anatma, anishvara. No soul, no controller, nothing. So, yeah. So, it's not very relishable. It's not very, who wants to become nothing? People could say, oh, I'm enjoying much more being something. And also the process, the abhidaya. What's the abhidaya to become nothing? Just sit there. So the prayojana is not very relishable. It's not very enjoyable. The abhidaya is not very relishable. There's practically no sambandha, because there's no Ishvara, there's no Atma, there's nothing. So what's left? Sanuk. Just sanuk. Why not? I'm having more fun being something. I'm having more fun being just a materialist. Why do I want to become nothing? Why do I want to subject myself to just sitting there and doing nothing?
You won't take birth.
Yeah. Better just enjoy, sanuk. So, because the process isn't relishable, because of the process is not something that people want to engage in, naturally they just fall back into their materialistic habits. There's no incentive, so to speak, for people to engage in the process. And similarly, you can see with Mayavadis, what is called Hinduism nowadays, is practically mainly influenced by Adi Shankara in one way or another, at least subconsciously. But still, so many so-called Hindus eating meat, drinking, even Brahmanas. There was one picture of some Smarta Brahmanas, they were sitting, they were all posing, with their shirts off, their Brahmin threads, and just in the corner of the picture, kind of half cut out, in the corner you see like a shelf with alcohol on it, bottles of alcohol, So if the process isn't relishable, if the goal isn't relishable, what is the incentive for people to engage in it? There's nothing. So, patantyado nadata yushmadangreha. People just fall back into their materialistic habits. Because people want to relish something. Naturally they want happiness. And so people in general, even people who aren't engaging in some kind of spiritual process, they have no direction. Some people are speculating, okay, well, what's the purpose of life? Some people say, in order to be satisfied, you have to work. That's the purpose of life. Or the purpose of life is just to be happy. Just do whatever make you happy, kind of like Sanuk. Just do whatever makes you happy. Don't let anybody else tell you otherwise. And just live for yourself. Some people say, okay, have a family, create progeny, push on the human species. Some people say, anyway, they say all kinds of things. Do some charity. Help the world. Help the people that are already in the world. But none of these things are actually satisfying. None of these things actually provide any real meaning outside of oneself, outside of one's own mind. And so anybody who's a little intelligent, they're not satisfied. They don't feel like they're actually doing anything. And therefore people go crazy. Their minds are all over the place. They don't have any real direction, nothing to focus on. No real truth to actually dedicate themselves to. Therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, "Vyavasayatmaka buddhir ekeha kurunandana bahushaka hyanantasya buddhayo vyavasayanam." That one who is outside of the realm of Krishna consciousness, or outside of practicing Krishna consciousness, bahushaka hyanantasya, their minds go in unlimited directions. Their attention is unlimitedly divided. Because they're just looking for something. Okay, this is nice. Oh wait, actually this looks nice. Oh wait, actually no, this is good, this is good, this is good. And so they just go nuts. They just go crazy. And they don't actually get anything done. And so Prabhupada's making the point in this purport, and also the Srimad Bhagavatam, the text is making this point, that one who engages in the process of Krishna consciousness, Vyavasayatmaka buddhi ekeha kurunandana, their intelligence is resolute. They can focus. They can actually, Prabhupada quotes this verse in the purport, Tada rajastamo bhava kama lobhadayashchaye cheta etair anavidham stitam sattve prasidati. So this is a verse from the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, 1-19, which comes in a series of 3 verses which are very important. The first one being Shrinvatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana hṛdyantyastho bhadrani vidhunoti suhritsatam. Translation: Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead, who is the Paramatma in everyone's heart and the benefactor of the truthful devotee, cleanses the desire for material enjoyment from the heart of the devotee, who has developed the urge to hear his messages, which are in themselves virtuous when properly heard and chanted. Text 18. Nashta prayeshva bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyuttama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service under the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. And then text 19, which is the verse in this purport, Tada rajastamo bhava kamalo bhadayashchaye cheta etara navidham stitam satte prasidati. As soon as irrevocable loving service is established in the heart, the effects of nature's modes of passion and ignorance, such as lust, desire, and hankering, disappear from the heart. Then the devotee is established in goodness and he becomes completely happy. Excuse me. So, the process of devotional service, as Srila Prabhupada quotes in this purport, begins with Shravanam and Kirtanam. Shravana means hearing, Kirtanam means chanting. And so one who gets the chance to hear the message of Srimad Bhagavatam, to hear the message of Krishna consciousness, and then also in turn chant the message of Krishna consciousness, only they can actually get the motivation or obtain the strength, the spiritual strength to overcome raja and tama, passion and ignorance. And Prabhupada quotes in this purport, the Krishna consciousness movement has actually proved this. In the Western countries, many young boys who were addicted to drugs and who had many other bad habits which they could not give up, abandoned all those propensities and are very seriously engaged in the chanting of the glories of the Lord as soon as they join the Krishna consciousness movement. Excuse me. So, one who engages in the process of Krishna consciousness, beginning with this Shravanam and Kirtanam, they can develop the strength. Why? Because the process of Krishna consciousness, the entire process from beginning to end, Sambandha, Abhidaya, and Prayojana, is completely relishable, completely ecstatic. For example, Sambandha. Sambandha means us and our relationship with Krishna, our relationship with the material world, Krishna's relationship with all these things as well. So what is our Sambandha? Our Sambandha is Krishna. He's Suhridam Sarva-bhutanam. He's the greatest friend of all living entities. And we're His loving servants. Jiver Swarupoy Krishna Nitya Das. That we are the eternal servants of Krishna and Krishna is our eternal friend. Who doesn't like that? Who doesn't want a friend who is there eternally, who we can be with lovingly forever? And
That means I got to give up my beaties.
and then, and then our nature itself, just the basic, the jiva is Satchit Ananda. Eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. Who doesn't like that? And then the Abhidaya. Abhidaya, as we mentioned, is Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu. The process is to hear and chant about Vishnu or Krishna. And so this is described as the supremely blissful process. And not only is it described like that, those who engage in it actually prove it. For example, we hear in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's so many examples in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. One prominent example is the talks between Ramananda Rai and Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They spoke for hours, all night. They didn't sleep, they didn't, all night they spoke. And the whole time they were in complete ecstasy, crying and, complete ecstasy, just speaking to each other about Krishna, just reminding each other about Krishna. And then similarly at Srivasangana, when devotees would do kirtan there, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when the Sankirtan movement first started, rolling on the ground in ecstasy, crying. Devotees would go unconscious for hours on end, it's described. Like at one time they went unconscious, all of them, for 6 hours, just completely in ecstasy. And even in the Bhagavatam, Parikshit Maharaj, he stopped eating. No eating, no drinking, no sleeping, nothing, just listening to the Bhagavatam. I mean, who can do that with something that's not nectarian, that's not relishable to hear? It gave him the motivation to just sit and hear because it was so relishable. And it's described many times. Parikshit Maharaj, in between chapters and things like that. He explains to Shukadeva Goswami how ecstatic it is to hear. And then so this process of Krishna consciousness is extremely blissful. And then, what do we achieve? By the process of Krishna consciousness, we achieve prayojana. Prayojana means the goal. And the goal is prema pumartho mahan, Krishna prema. Pure love for Krishna and going back home, back to Godhead. This is our prayojana. And so in this regard, I wanted to read, I mentioned it yesterday at the end of Dharmaseta Prabhu's class, this section of the Srimad Bhagavatam where Gopakumar goes back home, back to Godhead. It's not super long, but it's so amazing. It's so, so sweet. And it paints such a realistic picture of what it's like. I mean, realistic as if I know. But it's so vivid, such a vivid picture of what it's like to go back to Godhead. And it's so subtle, all the different things it describes. So it's so ecstatic to hear it. And I find whenever I hear it, it gives me so much life. Like, wow, okay, this is where I'm going. This is, yeah. So it starts in chapter 6, text number 20. In that realm, beyond, so he had just gone and seen, he was taken on his way back to Goloka Vrindavan. He had seen, Vaikuntha, he'd seen the Brahmana, he'd seen everything. He took him all the way up, and it's described. And so he finally gets to his destination. In that realm, beyond the reach of all the demigods, planetary rulers, and personal attendants of the Supreme Lord, I saw that life was going on, just as here in this Aryavarta country, in Bharatvarsha on earth. The sun was rising, and the other natural events were taking place every day in the sky, and on the land the people were speaking and behaving the same way as here. I was stunned by astonishment, extreme astonishment, and immersed in an ocean of ecstatic rasa. After a few moments, I saw some men, who might have been cowherds, wandering in the forest with some ladies, advanced in years and also wearing cowherd dress, who were picking flowers. The people there were different from anyone I had ever seen. Someone, it appeared, had stolen the wealth of their hearts and left them helplessly in love with him. Simply by seeing them, I felt the same kind of loving affection. Trying hard, I composed myself and respectfully asked them the following questions. O good people, you are served by a happiness so vast that the greatest sages can't obtain it even in dreams. You are the reservoirs of the mercy of the Supreme Lord, the husband of the goddess of fortune, mercy for which his loving devotees always pray. Please look with kindness upon this most wretched person who has come to you for shelter. Tell me, who is the king of this region? Where is his residence? Which road leads there? Dear, dear, most fortunate people, please be merciful to me, who am asking you with mournful cries. Please give me some answer, O faithful devotees, if even only by gesture. Oh, please hear the words of this tormented soul. Alas, you must be under the spell of that clever cheat. In this way, I moved here and there, anxiously questioning each person I met. And as I made my way forward, I came to the pasturing grounds of the cowherds. Looking around in all directions, I spotted in the distance a town adorned with the essence of all sweetness. On one side of that town, all about I heard wonderful songs sung by cowherd women and the charming sound of the churning of butter and the jingling of bangles. Trying to subdue my agitated joy, I walked forward and came across a seated elderly gentleman, sobbing profusely, incessantly chanting, Krishna, Krishna! With some skillful effort, I made him speak, and I heard him say in a choked voice that this town belonged to Nanda, the king of the cowherds, Sri Krishna's father. As soon as I heard those words, I fainted, overcome with delight. After a moment, that compassionate old man revived me, and I ran ahead and approached a gateway of the town and sat there in the gate. And there I saw, by the hundreds of thousands and tens of millions, all sorts of wonders, unseen, unheard of, unimaginable by anyone of this world. O best of the Brahmanas, I couldn't discern whether the people there were all enjoying the highest bliss or suffering in the grip of terrible misery. I heard the gopis' songs, coupled with their crying, but were they the songs of the greatest contentment or the greatest sorrow? I couldn't tell. A person seeing that place might think that he was in the material world, but by carefully reflecting on whatever he had seen before, he would understand he was now somewhere above all the material planets, all higher non-planetary regions, and all the transcendental realms of the spiritual world. Then an elderly lady came by. I bowed down to her and asked in a plaintive voice where Sri Nandanandana was playing today. The elderly lady said, "This morning that giver of life to us Vrajvasis went into the dense forest to play with his cows and friends and his respected elder brother. Later at dusk he will return." All the Vrajvasis are waiting on this path along the Yamuna, their eyes transfixed on the road. These trees stand with leaves erect, eagerly waiting the chance to see him. Surely he will come along this path. Sri Gopakumar said, "As if anointed by a downpour of the purest nectar, I gazed with one-pointed attention down the path the old lady had pointed out. The sheer force of my ecstasy had frozen my thighs, but with some effort I moved on, and I heard from afar a certain sound. Mixed with the mooing of cows, it was the supremely attractive murmur of Krishna's enchanting flute. That sound, sweet melodies of sportingly played notes, diverse with musical embellishments, was like nothing ever heard in the material world. Its attractive force at once overwhelmed everyone in the cowherd village. By the power of that sound, sap flowed in a downpour from the long rows of trees. A flood of tears fell from the eyes of every embodied being in the village of the cowherds. A shower of milk rained from the breasts of all of Krishna's mothers, even the elderly, and the rapid currents of the Yamuna suddenly stood still. I didn't know whether that flute gave out poison or the nectar of immortality, whether its sound was harsh like thunder or soft like water, hotter than blazing fire or cooler than the moon. I couldn't tell, but that sound drove all the Vrajvasis mad. All of them were utterly bewildered. Then I saw some women of Vraj come out of their homes, bearing in their hands the things needed to greet Krishna with worship. Others who had passed by held ornaments and offerings of food on their heads. Other ladies, ignoring everything around them, ran toward the mingled sounds of the mooing of cows and the song of the flute. In the frenzy of love for Krishna, the ladies stumbled down the path. Some ladies ran with their ornaments in disarray. Some could hardly keep their belts and hair tied. Some stayed in their homes, stunned like trees, and others fell unconscious to the ground. I'll skip a little bit. Yes. Actually, no, I don't have to. Some of the women who had fainted, their faces wet with tears and saliva, were carried forward by their girlfriends. Other ladies, pained by the urges of their love for Krishna, went ahead, pressed on by their friends. "Come see him!" The ladies, so diverse in complexion and adorned with diverse ornaments and dress, put to shame the good fortune of the goddess of fortune herself. Swiftly the ladies ran to the bank of the Yamuna, absorbed in singing his names and pastimes. I too went forward, as if pulled by someone, joining the throng of gopis rushing forward on all sides. I too began to run quickly. Then from a distance I saw him, his charming flute in hand. Running quickly, he emerged from among his friends and animals and approached me, saying in a sweet voice, "Look, Sridham, here is my dear friend Sarup, the sun who shines on the lotus of your family." Krishna was dressed for the forest. His garments, earrings, and peacock feather crown all swayed to and fro, and so did his garland of kadamba flowers. His fragrance perfumed all directions, and his beautiful lotus face blossomed with a playful smile. His lotus eyes beamed with a merciful glance, and the varied assets of beauty decorated him in a singular way. The fingers of his lotus hand busily pushed back the locks of his hair, which flew about, adorned with the dust raised by the cows. His tender, divine lotus feet touched the surface of the earth, just to grant her the gift of supreme splendor. Playfully dancing as they moved, they attracted everyone's heart with their great eagerness to walk quickly with large steps. The effulgence of his cloud-colored body, shining with the full sweetness of youth, lit up all corners of the sky. His beauty, which captured the hearts of the ever-dear devotees of Vraj, was an ocean abounding with countless excellences. He leaped forward and came close to me, compelled by the affection of his helpless devotee. I fainted in love at seeing him. He caught hold of me by the neck, and suddenly he too fell to the ground. Yeah, I'll stop there. So, that's just a small taste, tiny, itty-bitty, drop of a drop of a drop of the nectar of the prayojana of Krishna consciousness, of going back home, back to Godhead, which is our real nature. So Vrindavan, Goloka Vrindavan, which is where we're supposed to be, the promise is that it's the land of love with no distress. There's some, like as we heard, there's some things which appear as distress, but actually it's just the highest bliss, the absolute topmost limit, but there's no limit of ecstasy, of happiness. And so who could possibly deny or reject such an amazing thing? Who could possibly say, no, I don't want happiness. I don't want love without distress. I'll take my love with distress, or I'll take no love at all. So this is something that everybody wants. Everybody's looking for it. But in this world, there's so many problems, so much anxiety. Adi-daivik, adi-bhautik, adi-atmik, klesha. Miseries coming from the body, miseries coming from outside, miseries coming from other living entities, from natural occurrences, etc. And so people are just going crazy, suffering so much because they're looking for something. What is that thing that I can give myself to? What is that thing that I can surrender myself to that will just take care of everything? That's what people are looking for. And so Prabhupada's faith, in the poem that Srila Prabhupada wrote after he arrived in America, Srila Prabhupada, it was quoted in class the other day, I think by Dravida Prabhu. Srila Prabhupada writes in that poem, he said, "The words of the Srimad Bhagavatam are your incarnation. And if they," meaning the people of America, "receive them in submissive oral reception repeatedly," then they will be able to understand your message. So Srila Prabhupada's faith was that the words of the Srimad Bhagavatam, being the incarnation of Krishna, and then he quotes the verses that I quoted earlier, Srimad Bhagavatam 1:2-17-21. He actually quotes those verses after he says this as Shastra Pramana. So if one can get the chance to hear Srimad Bhagavatam, to hear the message of Krishna repeatedly in submissive oral reception, then what's the question? What's the question of going back to material life? What's the question of sinking into the modes of passion and ignorance? There's no question. The process of Krishna consciousness from beginning to end is so unlimitedly ecstatic, so unlimitedly profound and amazing and deep, that it leaves nothing to be desired. Absolutely nothing. Everything is there in the process of Krishna consciousness. And so Srila Prabhupada's faith is that if even non-devotees get to hear the message of the Srimad Bhagavatam repeatedly, then they will be able to give all these things up. And practically, like Srila Prabhupada says, it's been seen, it's been proved. The proof is in the pudding. And the pudding's right in front of us. So, Krishna consciousness is reality. Krishna consciousness is the absolute truth. The words of Shastra are the absolute truth. And while to some this may seem oppressive, this may seem like, oh, you're trying to impose something on me. What we're trying to impose on people is unlimited bliss, unlimited ecstasy, unlimited love, pure, absolute love. What's the imposition? There's no imposition. Okay, we're running low on time. So, the worst suffering in this material world is not, this is stated in the 11th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the worst suffering in this material world is not adi-atmik, adi-daivik, adi-bhautik. It's not punishments in the hellish planets. It's not all these different things. Actually, the worst suffering in this material world, and the only real suffering in this material world, is that the living entities have forgotten their closest friend. The living entities have turned away from the person who loves them the most, Krishna. And so, what are you left with? Nothing. Just emptiness. Just some hollow, sad excuse for an existence. So we should, in submissive oral reception, hear Srimad Bhagavatam, Shastra, Chaitanya Charitamrita, to the words of the Acharyas, chant the holy name attentively, and then also bestow this upon others by our preaching, book distribution. Give people Srimad Bhagavatam. Let them hear. This is Srila Prabhupada's faith, that they'll be purified. So we're low on time. I don't know if we have time for questions. Sorry, I went over. Okay. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu ki jai. Back home, back to Godhead ki jai.